I discovered the lie while standing in our nursery, but what shattered me wasn't just the truth. It was recognizing how deliberately they'd planned the deception. My name is Jonathan Carter, and I'm 34 years old. Each morning, I wake in my new apartment, check my legal documents, and breathe in the quiet that comes with choosing integrity over chaos. The signs were there in our old house, her prenatal records hidden in her work email, the insurance forms with another man's name, the calculated way she'd timed everything. My mortgage payments and grocery lists had created an illusion of stability that crumbled in one nursery-lit moment. I didn't rage. I documented. I photographed. I built timelines in neat blue folders while my cheek still throbbed from her response to my careful question. When truth threatens your roof, you choose the truth. But let me start from the beginning. The nursery had always been my favorite room. Soft yellow walls, the gentle whir of the mobile, that new baby scent mixing with fresh paint. But standing there that night, something shifted in the low lamplight. Maybe it was how the shadows fell, or maybe truth just has a way of forcing you to see what's been there all along. "Talia," I said, keeping my voice gentle as I looked down at our sleeping daughter. "I've been wondering about something." The mobile turned slowly overhead, unicorns dancing across the ceiling. Her features, they don't quite match either of our families. The silence stretched between us like a rubber band pulled too tight. When I turned to face my wife, her expression had transformed into something I'd never seen before. Raw panic wrapped in rage. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Her words came out sharp, brittle. "I'm not suggesting anything," I said carefully. "I'm just asking because I'm confused and worried and—" The impact caught me off guard, her fist connecting with my cheek before I could fully process she was swinging. I stumbled backward, hip catching the edge of the crib. It rattled against the wall, the sound piercing the nursery's calm. The baby stirred but didn't wake. My hand went to my face, feeling the heat rising under the skin. In all our years together, through every argument and stress, she'd never once turned violent. The shock of it froze me more than the pain. "Get out," she hissed, her voice low but trembling. "How dare you question—" I raised my hand, stepping backward toward the door. "I'm going to step away now," I said, surprised by how steady my voice remained. "We both need to calm down." In the bathroom, I pulled out my phone with shaking hands. The mirror showed what I needed to document, an angry red mark blooming across my cheekbone. I took several photos, making sure the timestamp showed clearly. Then I called the police. Officer Bennett arrived 20 minutes later. He was young but professional, taking in the scene with careful eyes as I explained what happened. Talia had locked herself in our bedroom by then. "I'm noting the visible bruising," he said, writing in his notepad. "Given the situation, I'd strongly recommend you find somewhere else to stay tonight. Do you have someone you can call?" I did. Grant picked up on the second ring, no hesitation in his voice when I explained. "Come over," he said. "I'll make up the couch." The drive to his apartment passed in a blur. Grant didn't ask questions when he saw my face, just handed me an ice pack and a blanket. "We'll figure it out tomorrow," he said, squeezing my shoulder before heading to his room. Now I'm lying here on his couch, pressing cold against my throbbing cheek, staring at shadows on an unfamiliar ceiling. The life I thought I knew, the morning coffee shared in comfortable silence, the nursery we painted together, the future we planned, feels like a story I read about someone else. Morning hit like a slow truck. My cheek throbbed as I sat up on Grant's couch, the events of last night crashing back. The ice pack had melted into a warm puddle beside me. "Made coffee," Grant called from his kitchen. "Strong stuff. You look like you need it." I did. My hands were steady now as I accepted the mug, but my mind raced with everything that needed to be done. The familiar scent of dark roast brought back Sunday mornings at home, Talia and I planning our week over breakfast. Amazing how quickly normal can shatter. "I need to start documenting everything," I said, pulling out my phone. "Got a notebook I can use?" Grant disappeared into his home office and returned with a fresh legal pad and some file folders. "Better yet," he said, settling at his dining room table with his laptop. "Let's lock down your finances first. You still have that joint account with her." My stomach clenched. Our shared credit card had a decent limit, and Talia handled most of the household purchases. She could empty it. Not if we freeze it now. Grant's fingers moved quickly across the keyboard. Here's the login page. I'll walk you through it. For the next hour, we methodically went through my accounts. Grant helped me document balances, freeze the joint credit card, and start a detailed spreadsheet of all transactions. Each click felt like both a protection and a small betrayal, necessary steps away from the life I'd thought was mine. Now for the timeline, I said, uncapping a pen. The yellow legal pad stared back at me, blank and waiting. I started with last night's date, then worked backward. The baby's birth, the pregnancy announcement, everything I could remember about the past year. My hand cramped as I filled page after page. By early afternoon, I was sitting across from attorney Naomi Kim in her downtown office. The bruise on my face had darkened to an ugly purple, but her sharp eyes focused more on the folder I'd brought. The window for contesting paternity is narrow, she said, reviewing my timeline. Once you're legally established as the father, it becomes exponentially harder to challenge regardless of biological truth. We need to act quickly. My throat tightened. How quickly? Days matter here, not weeks. She pulled out a legal pad of her own. I'll draft the motion for genetic testing today. In the meantime, document everything. Every text, every call, every interaction. Save it all. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. The text from Talia had started rolling in. I'm so sorry about last night. Please come home. We can talk about this. 3 minutes later. You're being ridiculous. The baby needs you. Then, if you don't come back, I'll tell everyone you abandoned your family. I showed them to Attorney Kim, who nodded grimly. Classic manipulation pattern. Don't engage except to establish your position clearly once. My fingers hovered over the phone before typing. I'll come when we can talk safely with evidence present. More texts flooded in, but I set the phone face down on Attorney Kim's desk. The constant buzzing felt like the pulse of something broken. Each message another crack in the foundation I'd thought was solid. 2 days later, I stood in my own driveway, manila envelope tucked under my arm. The house looked exactly the same. Trim burgundy shutters, brass house numbers gleaming in the afternoon sun. But home felt like a stranger now, wearing a familiar face that couldn't quite hide its lies. Grant's truck idled behind my car. You sure about this? He asked through the window. I nodded. Need to do it right. Everything documented. The key still worked. Inside, the house smelled of lavender cleaning spray. Talia always cleaned when she was anxious. It reminded me of Sunday afternoons helping her with laundry, the scent clinging to warm towels as we folded together. Amazing how memory ambushes you in the smallest moments. Talia sat rigid at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a coffee mug. Her eyes fixed on the bruise still visible on my cheek, then darted to Grant, settling quietly in the living room archway. You didn't have to bring backup, she said, voice tight. Yes, I did. I kept my tone neutral as I sat across from her. We both know why. The envelope made a soft sound as I placed it on the wooden table between us. One by one, I laid out the documents. Hospital bracelet from the delivery, insurance statements, dates circled in red. My hands stayed steady while I arranged them in chronological order. There's a prenatal panel here from 4 months ago, I said, tapping the billing code. One I never knew about. Why order genetic testing during pregnancy without telling me? Talia's fingers tightened around her mug. You're seeing patterns that aren't there. The stress and lighting in the nursery are playing tricks on you. Stress doesn't change genetic markers, Talia. I placed another paper in front of her. Screenshots of text messages about doctor's appointments I'd never known about. Neither does lighting. You're being paranoid. Her voice rose slightly. Looking for problems where there aren't any. The baby's barely a week old and you're already... I'm looking at facts, I interrupted quietly. Documents, times, dates, things that exist whether we argue about them or not. She pushed back from the table. I can't believe you're doing this. Making accusations, bringing witnesses. She gestured sharply toward Grant. Over what? Some shadows in a dark room? I reached into the envelope one final time and withdrew the formal request for genetic testing. The legal letterhead seemed to gleam under the kitchen lights as I slid it across the table. Talia's eyes fell to the document. Something flickered in them, fear maybe, or rage. Her hands trembled slightly as she read the first few lines. You really want to do this? she whispered. I want the truth. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed. Outside, a lawnmower droned somewhere down the street, the mundane sound of a normal afternoon that felt anything but normal. Talia's eyes met mine, and I saw it then, the flash of cornered anger, the realization that tears and manipulation wouldn't make me back down. Her jaw tightened as she stared at the legal document between us. I gathered the other papers back into my envelope, each one a brick in the wall of evidence I was building. Lies hate paper trails, and mine was just beginning. Detective Morales' office smelled of coffee and manila folders. 3 days had passed since I'd laid out those documents for Talia, and now I sat across from his desk watching him review my case file. The assault report has been processed, he said, his voice steady and professional. We've documented the photographs of your injury and Officer Bennett's initial response. He looked up at me, his eyes carrying the weight of having seen too many cases like mine. You did the right thing, getting it on record immediately. My throat tightened. Thank you. Many victims... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Many people in your situation wait too long. Evidence fades. Stories change. He tapped his pen against a stack of papers. But you've given us a solid foundation here. I nodded, remembering the sting of ice against my cheek that first night. The memory felt distant now, like watching someone else's story unfold. There's something else, Morales continued, sliding a sealed envelope across his desk. The pediatric clinic responded to your records request. My hands didn't shake as I opened it, but my pulse quickened. Inside were printed emails, test orders, laboratory requisitions, all stamped with dates from months before. I spread them across the detective's desk, the fluorescent lights harsh against the white paper. This test order, I said, pointing to a highlighted line. It was sent to her work email 4 months ago. The timestamp glared back at me. 2:14 p.m. on a Tuesday when I thought we were both living the same truth. Morales leaned forward. And you had no knowledge of this testing? None. The word came out harder than I intended. I remembered that Tuesday. I'd brought her lunch at the office, her favorite sandwich from the deli around the corner. We'd talked about nursery colors. All while this email sat in her inbox, proof of questions she never shared. Later that night, I sat at my temporary desk in Grant's spare room, the clinic records spread before me like pieces of a puzzle I never wanted to solve. My highlighter moved methodically across each page, marking dates, times, decisions made without me. The yellow streaks built a timeline of deception, a genetic counseling appointment when she'd told me she was working late, lab orders processed while we picked out cribs together. Each highlight was a moment when truth could have prevented all of this. Remember when you were a kid, and finding out Santa wasn't real felt like the biggest lie possible? I thought about that as I worked through the documents. How simple those childhood revelations seemed now. My phone buzzed. A text from Detective Morales. Additional records may be available through insurance audit. Let me know if you want to pursue. I set the phone down and stared at the highlighted papers. Each marked line represented a choice, not a mistake, not a moment of weakness, but a deliberate decision to hide the truth. The documents proved the deception started long before that night in the nursery, before I ever asked about our daughter's features. The weight of it settled over me like a heavy blanket. How many more hidden choices would the insurance records reveal? How many other documents waited to expose moments when she'd chosen lies over trust? I reached for my notebook and wrote the date at the top of a fresh page. Below it, I added Detective Morales' badge number and a reference to the clinic records. Evidence doesn't just collect itself. It builds piece by piece until the truth can't hide anymore. The downtown legal district hadn't changed since my first visit to Attorney Kim's office, but I had. 2 weeks of evidence gathering had hardened something in me, like steel being tempered. We're filing 2 motions today, Attorney Kim said, adjusting her thin-rimmed glasses as she spread documents across her mahogany desk. First, temporary financial protections to prevent joint assets from disappearing. Second, and most critical, compelling genetic testing. I leaned forward, studying the legal language that would shape my future. Why the rush? Because the law presumes paternity after a certain window, she explained, her tone carrying the weight of experience. Once that window closes, challenging parentage becomes exponentially more difficult. She tapped a paragraph with her pen. Right now we have the advantage of timing. The words presumed father made my stomach clench. I remembered the day Talia and I had registered at the baby store, how I'd tested every crib for stability, imagining keeping our child safe. Now here I sat, filing motions to protect myself from the very future I'd planned. Your signature here, Attorney Kim pointed, and here. My pen moved steadily across the pages. Each signature felt like both an ending and a beginning. That night, as I worked late at my temporary desk in Grant's spare room, my phone lit up with Talia's name. Again, and again, and again. You're doing this because you want a carbon copy of yourself, her voice accused when I finally answered. A child who matches your ego, that's all this is about. This is about truth, I replied, keeping my voice level. Nothing else? Truth? She laughed, but it wasn't the laugh I remembered from better days. The truth is you're throwing away your family over paranoid delusions. I ended the call, but her words kept coming via text. Please just sign the acknowledgement papers. The insurance needs it. You're making everything harder than it needs to be. The next morning, an overnight envelope arrived at Grant's apartment. Inside was a father's acknowledgement form, Talia's signature already in place. A yellow sticky note marked where I should sign. I placed it in my evidence folder without signing. An hour later, my phone buzzed with a new message. Did you get the papers? Looking at that unsigned document, I remembered Attorney Kim's words about windows closing. Each day I held out strengthened my legal position, but also widened a gulf I wasn't sure could ever be bridged. Not that I wanted it bridged anymore. How do you rebuild trust with someone who sees truth as an inconvenience? The phone vibrated again. You're going to regret making this difficult. I set the phone face down and stared at the father's acknowledgement form. The blank signature line seemed to pulse with all the pressure Talia was applying, all the manipulation she thought would work. But I'd learned something vital these past weeks. Pressure only works when you forget you have a choice. My evidence folder was thick now, filled with documented lies and photographed bruises and time-stamped decisions that had nothing to do with truth. Each attempt to force my signature only added another page to that record. The phone buzzed again on the desk, and again, and again. The morning sun hit the courthouse steps like a spotlight, but I couldn't make myself leave my truck. Not yet. The manila folder on my passenger seat held every shred of evidence I'd gathered. Dates, documents, that damning prenatal test order. But suddenly it felt lighter than the weight in my chest. I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white against the black leather. The morning commuters streamed past my windshield, their routines untouched by the kind of morning I was having. A father walked by holding his little girl's hand, and something inside me cracked. This wasn't just about losing a marriage. This was about losing the story I'd already written in my head, teaching a child to ride a bike, bandaging scraped knees, being the kind of father who showed up for every recital and game. The future I'd planned dissolved like morning fog, leaving only the cold reality of what had to happen next. The dashboard clock blinked 8:47. Attorney Kim expected me at 9:00 sharp. I had 13 minutes to pull myself together, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Remember when you were 10 and Dad taught you to change a tire? Sometimes the hardest part, he'd said, is just getting started. The memory of his voice, steady and sure, made my throat tight. He'd raised me to face things head on, but he never told me it would hurt like this. A tear slid down my cheek, then another. I let them fall, alone in the cab of my truck where no one could see the armor crack. How many nights had I laid awake, trying to make sense of how we got here? How many times had I replayed every moment, searching for signs I should have seen? Get it together, John, I whispered to my reflection in the rearview mirror. My voice sounded rough, unfamiliar. A police cruiser pulled into the courthouse lot, reminding me of that night with Officer Bennett, the ice pack, the bruise that had finally faded. The memory steadied me. This wasn't about what I was losing. It was about protecting what was left, my dignity, my future, my right to build a life on truth instead of lies. I grabbed a tissue from the console, wiped my face, and took 3 deep breaths. The steering wheel felt solid under my palms now, an anchor point in the storm. Time to move. The folder felt heavier as I lifted it, like it knew the weight of what it contained. I checked my tie in the mirror one last time, straightened my shoulders, and stepped out into the morning air. Each step up the courthouse stairs felt deliberate, measured. Inside, the security line moved slowly. I placed my watch and keys in the plastic bin, held my folder close. The metal detector stood like a doorway between my old life and whatever came next. The security officer waved me forward. The machine beeped as I walked through, sharp and clear like a bell marking the start of something I couldn't take back. 2 days after the courthouse filing, I was sorting through work emails when an unfamiliar address caught my eye. hrcorporateservices.com. My finger hesitated over the delete key. I hadn't worked with their company in months. The subject line read, "Dependent update, confirmation required." Something made me open it. "Dear Ms. Carter, please review and confirm the following changes to your dependent coverage." My coffee went cold beside me as I scanned the document. Standard HR paperwork, columns of data, insurance codes. Then my hand froze on the mouse. There, under secondary contact legal guardian, was a name I didn't recognize. Reed Lawson. The room seemed to tilt sideways. I scrolled back up, checking the timestamp. 3 months ago, while Talia was still pregnant. While I was painting the nursery on weekends, while I was reading those parenting books, while I was planning for a future that apparently already had someone else's name on it. Remember how Dad used to say truth hits like summer lightning? Quick and bright and leaving everything changed? This was that moment. My printer hummed to life as I sent the page through. The paper was still warm when I grabbed my red pen, circling Reed's name, the timestamp, the designation, legal guardian, in precise, steady strokes. My hand didn't shake. Funny how clarity can steady you, even when it hurts. The sound of my evidence folder opening was familiar now, almost comforting. This new page belonged with the others. The prenatal test orders, the assault report, the text messages full of manipulation. Each document a piece of a puzzle I hadn't wanted to solve. I thought about those quiet evenings during the pregnancy. Talia working late, always on her phone. Had she been messaging him? Planning this? The memory of her smile when I bought that little baseball mitt at the sports store twisted in my gut. She must have known even then. The office felt too small suddenly. I stood up, pacing to the window where morning traffic flowed normal and steady below. Behind me, that printed page sat like a burning coal on my desk. Not just evidence of an affair anymore. This was proof of premeditation. Someone else had been chosen, positioned, prepared to step into my role before I'd even known there was a question. The corporate logo at the top of the page caught the light as I turned back. Their HR department had sent this to my personal email by mistake, probably an old address still in their system from when Talia and I shared everything. One wrong click had torn down the last of her careful plans. I slid the page into the folder, right behind the hospital records. Reed Lawson. The name felt foreign in my mind, yet he'd been there all along, a shadow I hadn't known to look for. Everything shifted now. Not just my marriage, not just my future, but my past too. Every late meeting, every work event, every time she'd pulled away from me. The picture was finally complete. The folder closed with a soft finality. On its blue cover, my handwriting stood stark and clean. Evidence. Inside, a stranger's name confirmed what I'd feared but couldn't prove until now. This betrayal hadn't been spontaneous or unplanned. Someone else had been waiting in the wings, ready to step into the life I thought was mine. I stared at Reed's name through the folder, feeling the weight of everything it meant. The truth I'd been searching for had found me instead, delivered by a corporate email server's simple mistake. The courthouse air felt thin and antiseptic as I waited outside courtroom C. Grant sat beside me, both of us in pressed shirts and ties that suddenly felt too tight. My evidence folder lay flat on my lap, each document arranged in chronological order, tagged with colored tabs, a timeline of destruction in legal-sized paper. Carter versus Carter, the clerk called. Inside, Judge Aguirre's presence commanded immediate attention. Her dark eyes moved between Talia and me as our attorneys made opening statements. I kept my gaze steady, hands folded on the table. When my turn came, I approached with my folder. Your Honor, I've documented everything since the night of September 12th. My voice stayed level as I outlined the sequence: the assault after my question about the baby, Officer Bennett's report, the hidden prenatal test, the HR email revealing Reed Lawson. Judge Aguirre studied each piece of evidence, her expression unchanging. She paused longest on the hospital records and the HR form, comparing dates. "Ms. Carter?" She addressed Talia. "These medical records indicate genetic testing was performed during your pregnancy. Can you explain why this wasn't disclosed to your husband?" Talia's response came wrapped in carefully constructed innocence. "It was just routine screening, Your Honor. I didn't think. The court notes these tests were ordered through your private email, not through your OB/GYN standard procedures." Judge Aguirre's tone left no room for manipulation. "Mr. Carter has presented compelling evidence of deliberate withholding of medical information, followed by physical assault when questioned." The judge turned to her computer, typing briefly. "I'm granting the protective order based on the documented assault. Additionally, I'm authorizing immediate genetic testing through our approved facility." She looked directly at me. "Dr. Anand will oversee the process. His lab maintains strict chain of custody protocols." An hour later, I met Dr. Anand in his sterile office. His gray hair and careful movements spoke of decades ensuring scientific truth prevailed over emotional chaos. "We'll need cheek swabs from you and the child," he explained, laying out sealed collection kits. "But Mr. Carter, there's something you should know." He pulled up a database on his screen. "A genetic test was already performed through our lab 3 months ago." My chest tightened. "I never authorized—" "Correct. It was a private order." He adjusted his glasses. "I can't discuss those results, but I can perform new testing under the court order to establish an official record." The sample collection took less than 5 minutes. Dr. Anand sealed everything in tagged evidence bags, explaining how each step would be documented to ensure the results would stand up in court. 3 days later, I received the call to return to the lab. Dr. Anand handed me a sealed envelope, his manner gentle but professional. "The results are definitive, Mr. Carter. The genetic markers exclude you as the biological father." The paper trembled slightly in my hands. Even expecting this, even after all the evidence had pointed here, seeing it in official, clinical language made my heart pound against my ribs. The truth I'd fought to uncover now sat in black and white, undeniable as sunrise. I held that envelope, the weight of it, the finality of it, and felt my pulse hammering in my throat. This wasn't just a suspicion anymore. This wasn't a theory or a fear or a midnight doubt. This was science and law and fact, documented and sealed with the authority of the court. The final hearing took 15 minutes. Judge Aguirre's ruling was clear and unequivocal. No child support obligations could be enforced through deception. My assets would remain protected, and the divorce could proceed with the full truth on record. Attorney Kim had prepared me for various outcomes, but watching Talia's face as reality settled was still difficult. Some part of me remembered Sunday mornings with coffee and crosswords back when I thought home meant safety. "The court's decision is final," Judge Aguirre stated, her tone brooking no argument. "Mr. Carter has provided comprehensive evidence of willful misrepresentation. The genetic testing results are conclusive. This court will not compel financial responsibility based on fraud." I sat straight-backed as she continued. "The protective order remains in effect. All joint accounts will maintain their current freeze pending division of assets. Divorce proceedings will move forward under case number 2023-D4891. The gavel struck with decisive finality. In the hallway afterward, Talia approached despite her attorney's warning gesture. Her eyes held that familiar mix of manipulation and desperation I'd grown to recognize. "John, please, we could still—" "No." I kept my voice quiet but firm. "The truth is documented now. That's all I ever wanted." I took a step back, maintaining the court-ordered distance. "I won't be cruel about this, Talia, but I won't live in denial either." Grant waited by his truck in the parking lot, ready to help move the last of my things. The drive to my new place was quiet, just the sound of tires on pavement and the weight of change in the air. The apartment was small but clean, with good morning light. I'd chosen it for its fresh start. No history, no shadows, no echoes of broken trust. Grant helped carry in the last boxes, then gripped my shoulder once before leaving. Some friendships grow stronger in crisis, I'd learned. You just have to let people show you who they really are. That evening, I stood in my new living room watching sunset paint the walls gold. The space felt both empty and full of possibility. On the desk by the window, I placed my brass house key, not to the old home of lies, but to this clean slate. Beside it, I set down the blue folder labeled Evidence, now closed for good. All the documents, dates, and proof that had carried me here could rest now. Their job was done. Moving to the window, I gripped the blind's wand and turned it. Fresh morning light poured in, warming my face. I took a deep breath, feeling it fill my lungs with possibility. The weight I'd carried these past months began to lift, replaced by something lighter. Not happiness exactly, not yet, but peace. Real peace, built on truth instead of illusion. Standing there in that honest light, I understood something I needed to share with anyone who might be facing their own moment of terrible clarity. Peace arrives when truth outruns fear.